Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to thank the other members, Ranking Member Cruz, Senator Klobuchar, and Senators Whitehouse and Graham for coming out today. Senator Graham has sat through and chaired a similar hearing, so he's a diehard fan of ours, so we appreciate that, or at least very interested in the subject, which we appreciate. So thank you for holding this hearing and bringing attention to the tragedy unfolding in the Middle East. I'm here today with colleagues from the U.S. Agency for National Development and the Department of Homeland Security. I'm going to limit my remarks to the State Department's role in assisting refugees overseas. We're also going to talk about aid inside Syria. Nancy will take the lead on that, and then Molly Groom from DHS will talk about resettlement. But I'm happy to take questions on any of these subjects because we're working very closely together on all of these things. And in the interest of time, I'll keep my remarks more restricted. You know that more than 2.3 million have crossed Syria's borders and thus are considered refugees. They've fled to all the neighboring countries, most of whom are struggling to help them. We are incredibly grateful to these countries for letting them in, and we want them to keep their borders open and not push anyone back. In order for them to do so, these neighboring countries need our help. They need our help not just in delivering aid to the refugees, but they also need our help for their own poor citizens. And they need help for their own budgets, which are strained and overstretched by delivering services to these much larger populations. The impact is that schools have moved to double shifts to accommodate Syrian children. Hospital beds are filled by Syrian patients. Rents have risen. Wages have fallen as a result of the competition for housing and jobs. There are water shortages in Jordan and Lebanon. The drain on water resources is especially severe in Jordan. And helping the host community, in addition to the refugees themselves, is an accepted tenet of refugee work. We do this, for example, in remote parts of Chad, where poor Chadians are given help alongside refugees from Darfur. And in this case, we need to do more in terms of helping them provide services, health care, clean water, extra schooling, in addition to items like food vouchers, household supplies, and blankets. This will involve more than just humanitarian agencies. We need and are getting help from the World Bank and our development agencies and our colleagues at USAID who work on longer-term development. In talking about the situation of the refugees themselves, I think that was a very good video that we saw from UNHCR. I recently made my 6th visit to the region. My 7th is upcoming to Jordan this weekend. Right before Christmas, I traveled to Erbil in northern Iraq. There I had the pleasure of wading through oceans of mud in cold temperatures to visit with refugee families and consult with local government officials. The good news is that the UN agencies, non-governmental organizations, and local charities have managed to house a lot of people in tents and keep them warm using an extra layer of tenting fabric, kerosene stoves, and lots of blankets. Still, this is no place for children to grow up. I saw kids there running around in plastic flip-flops without socks. This is not a good environment for families. And I have met with Syrian refugees in all of the other countries bordering Syria. In Lebanon, they continue to keep its borders mostly open and is now hosting the largest number of refugees in the smallest country in the region. You've already mentioned its refugees make up 20% of the population in Lebanon, on top of 400,000 Palestinians who've been there for decades. More than 1 million refugees are split between Turkey and Jordan, and those are just the registered refugees. There's many more citizens from Syria living in both of those cities. Iraq and Egypt also have large populations of Syrians. It's important to know, and I am so grateful that some of you have visited the camps, but most refugees do not live in the camps. In early December, my principal deputy, Assistant Secretary Simon Henshaw, visited refugees in cities of southern Turkey, Kilis and Gaziantep, and there he saw the work of NGOs and municipal governments struggling to deal with an influx of refugees living in the cities and towns of Turkey. Despite their efforts, most refugees were not getting services and were living in substandard conditions. For this reason, one of our top goals is to focus more attention on the plight of urban refugees and do everything we can to get aid to these families. Other challenges that we talk about in the testimony are children. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees and UNICEF have come together. There's a press statement that came out today that Save the Children and World Vision were also involved in an initiative that we support called No Lost Generation, trying to make sure that we keep these children inside and fleeing from Syria safe, healthy, educated, and away from danger. They need a future. Another issue of great concern to all of us is protection of women and girls. And here we have, I know, a lot of bipartisan support. We also have support from Secretary Kerry, who has put together an initiative called Safe from the Start to make sure we protect women and girls in these crises. We're also concerned about them surviving the winter. Final remarks, I'd like to say that on January 15th, we'll be in Kuwait for a pledging conference to reiterate American support for the humanitarian response. Of course, beyond that, our secretary will be heading to the Geneva II conference to try to bring peace to this very troubled area. This is not the only crisis to which we are rushing humanitarian aid. South Sudan is suffering a political crisis that has displaced 190,000 of its citizens, with another 32,000 streaming across its borders. In the Central African Republic, UNHCR's latest update puts the number of displaced at 930,000. This is 20% of that country's population displaced, the same proportion as there are refugees in Lebanon. This administration is addressing all of these crises and other crises at the same time with high levels of vigor and energy and dedication. The most senior members of the administration are fully engaged, including Ambassador Power, National Security Advisor Rice, and my boss, Secretary of State John Kerry. But their attention does not necessarily mean that these tough situations are easily solved, and we can't do much without your support, especially in the case of humanitarian endeavors. Support for our budget and the budgets of all our diplomatic and foreign aid activities is very helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Richard. Nancy Lindberg serves as USAID Assistant Administrator for the Bureau of Democracy, Conflict, and Humanitarian Assistance, where she leads the efforts of more than 500 team members in 9 offices focused on crisis prevention, response, recovery, and transition. She has led DCHA teams in response to the ongoing Syrian crisis, the Sahel 2012 and Horn of Africa 2011 droughts, the Arab Spring, and numerous other global crises. She was back to her home base in Chicago a few months ago discussing the typhoon in the Philippines, so I know you have a very busy schedule. Prior to joining USAID, she was president of Mercy Corps for 14 years, a BA and MA in English Literature from Stanford, an MA in Public Administration from the JFK School at Harvard. Ms. Lindberg, I want to take this opportunity to thank you again for coming to Chicago and for all your good work. Please proceed.
Great. Thank you very much, Chairman Durbin. Thanks, Ranking Member Cruz and other members of the subcommittee. We really appreciate your having this hearing today to shine a light on this crisis and, most importantly, put a human face on it. We've heard the staggering statistics, and the numbers are really hard to comprehend. And thank you, Senator Klobuchar, for the stories that you told. That those in need in this crisis are equal to the entire state of New Jersey. And the displaced are as if the entire state of Massachusetts were out of their homes. And most importantly, the 5 million children who are affected is equal to the children in the entire 25 largest school districts in this country. So that's all of New York, all of Los Angeles, et cetera, for 25 school districts. This is a generation of Syrian children who've been traumatized by bombs, many of them lost their homes, their families, their friends. And unfortunately, similar to Massachusetts and New Jersey, the region also faces one of the worst winters in the last 100 years, adding to the hardship of families out of their homes. Working in partnership with the international community, the United States humanitarian response has reached millions. We have saved millions of lives. But we also know that the needs are escalating faster than any of our collective responses can manage to reach. So I'd like to cover 3 quick areas today. First, a quick update on our very significant life-saving humanitarian response, which does include a focus on the most vulnerable, especially women and, very importantly, children who will steer the future course of this country and this nation. The United States has made a total contribution, as you noted, Senator Durbin, $1.3 billion. And we are reaching regularly about 4.2 million people in all 14 governments inside Syria, as well as the 2 million refugees in neighboring countries. And we've doubled the number of our partners inside Syria, and we're working through all possible channels, the UN, NGOs, international groups, and local. We are reaching about 2.7 million people with medical care, and thanks to the many extraordinarily courageous doctors, nurses, and health workers who risk their lives every day inside Syria. We are the single largest donor of emergency food aid, and thanks to the very flexible tools that allow us to provide vouchers and do local regional purchase, we are able to feed about 4.2 million people inside Syria and 1.3 million refugees every day who depend upon that food. Finally, all of our assistance takes into account the vulnerability, particularly of women and children, and women who experience gender-based violence. As Ann noted, we have an initiative called Safe from the Start that prioritizes this in all of our assistance. Also, as Ann noted, we are working very closely with the international community on the No Lost Generation strategy that looks at programs to help children inside and outside of Syria, and today is the start of a very major multi-partner media campaign to put a face on this crisis that has dragged on into its third year now. So a few key challenges that I want to note. The first is that the insecurity of this war zone complicates every day the ability to deliver assistance. Roads are closing. Hundreds of checkpoints make it very dangerous for aid workers to cross lines and to get into communities. Most concerning, there's an estimated 250,000 people who have been completely and deliberately cut off from humanitarian assistance for many months now in areas that are besieged by the regime, as you noted, in campaigns that are unconscionable, kneel or starve. In October, the UN Security Council passed a presidential statement that urges all parties of the conflict to facilitate immediate access. This statement lays down a very clear set of markers for the Syrian regime regarding the world's expectations that it will provide the access that it's long denied. And by taking these clear steps, the regime has the power to enable life-saving assistance to reach more than 200,000 people in need immediately. Finally, resources remain a key constraint, and as we head to Kuwait next week for the Donors Conference, we're making a major push for all donors across the globe to step up to the plate to help with this escalating burden. We have also within USAID reoriented our development activities in the neighboring states. We are working with our development and humanitarian resources and with our partners to help create a comprehensive response for the neighboring states that are straining to accommodate the needs of their own people in addition to the millions of new refugees. And we're seeing this convergence of the poorest communities hosting the largest number of refugees. So in Jordan, for example, where the domestic water supply is among the lowest in the world, USAID used $20 million from our Complex Crisis Fund to help communities with that large refugee population. So our efforts are both to assist with the development needs of communities as well as contribute to the region's stability. We know that humanitarian assistance is not the solution to this horrible crisis, and it absolutely cannot end the bloodshed. But it is saving countless lives every day. It is helping to protect the vulnerable from a very, very devastating conflict. The United States remains committed to using every possible tool that we can to reach Syrians in need and to bring in our full diplomatic weight to help attain greater access. So thank you for your time today, for the vital congressional support that makes our work possible, and we look forward to your questions.
Thanks, Ms. Lindborg.